Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, The Lens of Truth with me, Florentino, and for today's video, I've been doing a lot of unboxings and just showing off all of my video game collections, and I just did one since the Wii U and the 3DS eShops are finally closed. So here is my collection of my 3DS games. And I do have an entire playlist on my channel of all things unboxings, tier lists, and collections. And I do have a lot more coming with my GameCube collection, Wii games, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo DS. And although this library is really small, I really enjoyed all of the games that I have and played over the years. But before we get started, if you're new to my channel, hit that like button, ring the bell, leave a comment, and let's get to it. Alright, so for my first 3DS game, this is actually a very rare and special one that I have not opened and I will not open because this one is a Nintendo 3DS Guide Through the Louvre. And stay tuned because I do have an entire video that I'm working on that's just dedicated to this specific game and my trip to Paris, France, where I got this one from. Now this game is one of my most played games on the 3DS and it's Kid Icarus Uprising. This is such a good game. Hopefully there's a HD remaster, complete remake in the future for this because we definitely need it. And I did an entire unboxing of this last year, so go ahead and check that out. And a classic remake, Star Fox 64 3D, is a must-have game. Remade textures, music, and although the voice acting is not as good as the original, this is a must-have early 3DS game. Now, New Super Mario Bros. 2 was an okay game when it came out, but the thing that made it better was the actual paid DLC that you were able to buy, which made the levels a lot more interesting and a lot more difficult. Now, this is the game that you want your 3D cranked all the way up. It's Super Mario 3D Land. This one was made specifically for the 3DS, and it's a must-have 3D action platformer. Metroid Federation Force gets a lot of hate, but if you did end up playing it with friends, random people online, it really was a solid Metroid experience. Some frustrating moments here and there, but if you are able to find it cheap, check it out. It really was bad timing when we didn't get any Metroid games at all. But one that needs no debate is Metroid Samus Returns. Yes, this game is really tough, and Metroid Dread did make a lot more improvements, but this is the blueprint for the smooth controlling Samus that we have in Metroid Dread. Now, Resident Evil Revelations looked amazing when it first came out on the 3DS with its online mode, and it was really creepy as well. Now, The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes is another game that had iffy online and rough single player if you didn't have people to play with, but the thing that made it worth it was those boss battles. That's probably the only saving grace that this game had, even though some of the environments were pretty fun. Now, Majora's Mask 3D had great things with it, with remade camera angles, music, graphics, but the controversy was the terrible eyeballs in a lot of those bosses. And having played the original, that was probably the worst mistake that they did, but there was a lot of quality of life features that made the game better in some ways. Now, one of the best games on the 3DS for a Zelda game is The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. This is a direct sequel to the SNES, A Link to the Past. This was a must-have game. You guys have to check it out. It has great dungeon design, great bosses, and the 3D looks great. And The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time 3D is actually even better than Majora's Mask for a full-on remake of the N64 classic. Everything from quality of life improvements, the graphics, the sound, this is one that you have to have in your library. Now, Ghost Recon Shadow Wars was a game that my brother randomly bought. I didn't even know this game existed, but once I checked it out, it's a great strategy shooter. So I would recommend going to YouTube and checking out some few videos if you are interested in this type of a game, but it was actually very solid and fun. Castlevania Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate. It's a great action 3DS game because it was actually the team that eventually made Metroid Samus Returns and Metroid Dread. Although not perfect, this one had great boss battles and great action. As for Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, this was the harder version of the two that was released. This is a must recommend Fire Emblem game for the hardcore versus Fire Emblem Fates Birthright, which is a lot easier, but both of them still had great storylines, and when you complete both of them, there's a third chapter that has the full final ending. Although I didn't like how they did this, trying to be almost like the Pokemon games, these were still some solid Fire Emblem titles. Now, Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia is a remake of an old Fire Emblem game, and this one had differences in that you're able to walk around some of the environments and trigger the strategy RPG battles. So it was a fun surprise of a remake. Now, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon does get a lot of hate because of the way that it's broken down in the gameplay department and it's mission based, but besides all that, it was a fun, solid game and the visuals look great. Now, Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS surprised me because it runs at 60 frames per second. That is insane. And even the online was solid, especially when you're playing one-on-one. I can't believe that this game runs as great as it does. This is a must-have for your 3DS. And it still amazes me that you have a great fighter on a handheld. For my last game, Kirby Planet Robobot is probably one of the last 3DS games I ever purchased, and this was a solid Kirby game. Out of all the ones that released on the 3DS and even some on the Switch and Wii U, this was probably one of the most creative ones besides Kirby and the Forgotten Land. For this 2D style Kirby game, this one, they really innovated everything because of the mechanical robot nature. This was a must-have game if you haven't already tried it out. So there we go, that was my entire 3DS collection. Although it's not big, I feel like I have a lot of the solid must-have 3DS titles. I do have a few digital games on my 3DS as well. But yeah, let me know down in the comment section below which 3DS games are your favorites. And thank you for watching, see you later, and bye-bye.